Thank you, and hello, hello. Last year we had a full room watching this talk. This year not so much, despite the good timing, auspicious. Perhaps people are too angry, hopefully angry for a better Europe. But also perhaps it's because they all left since last year because Europe is worse, potentially. Let's see. So we are here with a great crew. I think most of these folks do not need an introduction, but you have them just behind me as well. And we are here to discuss whether Europe or the European Union, a little bit both, because we like the UK as well, and some of the other peripheral countries, is dead or not. And with this topic, let's start by just checking the room and feeling who here is bullish on Europe. Like, okay. Interesting dissonance between the speaker side and the audience side. That was interesting. So I'm not even going to ask the opposite question, but I'm going to ask like who here feels like neutral about Europe, given the lukewarm reception. Damn. Okay. This is bad for Europe, but great for the debate potentially. Let's hope to get some juicy takes here, but because I know they will come from this great set of panelists. Let's start with a less controversial beginning. And starting with Diogo, I know that we have very controversial takes on Europe. Last year's conversation was really good. I recommend you to watch the video. But before we jump into those, given that you have lived in Portugal, you have lived in the US, you kind of grew up in both countries, you have a vested interest in both countries because you are living here, but Anchorage is incorporated in the US. I wanted to understand, also in light of a recent tweet you had about the USBC global dominion being one of the few breakthroughs of European policy, apart from perhaps food regulation. How are you feeling regarding Europe and what's cool about Europe? What makes you stay right now here?
I don't know. Let me see. A year later, let me see how we are in terms of, well, it's still there. So I'm not sure if there's been a lot of progress, but clearly we're focusing on the right things. The thing that I have to say is I'm both bullish Europe, and at the same time, I think vocal criticism and the ability to actually be clear-eyed about what's happening, both of those things, the hallmark of intelligence is to hold two opposing views simultaneously. And I think that very much reflects my view here. Yes, I live here. The primary reason why I live here, candidly, is family and the fact that I grew up in Portugal, and thus there's this nuclear family that is very hard to move wholesale somewhere else. At the same time, I recognize the advantages of Europe. I also recognize all of the shortcomings. Right now, it feels to me, in terms of trends, the trend line is not positive. There's a couple of highlights. I do think EU, things like the 28th state, those types of things are actually positive in terms of progress. I think we have shining beacons of light like Revolut, that are companies that primarily started in Europe, but then at the same time on the reverse side, you have the founders leaving and you have fintech as the primary and maybe only area outside of drugs in maybe one or two companies that are actually succeeding. We're not seeing the signs that we wanted to see, which is new company creation that is meaningful, real market cap that is meaningful, venture capital, funding these things. One of the bright spots that I want to mention is obviously on the military, some wake up, some investments, some new startups, some excitement there, but by and large, I don't think the trend lines are positive. I still recognize as last year that from a cultural perspective, we're very strong, that from a social safety net, we're very strong, from a city planning perspective, we're very strong. There's lots of strengths that Europe has, but the trend line of the things that allow you to keep these things is actually negative. The things that allow you to keep these things are wealth creation, the feeling of equality, the feeling of progression, the feeling that you can actually achieve from your own meritocracy. And all those things I don't feel like are actually particularly progressing in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. I remember from last year you mentioned that Europe was built on, or is currently standing on top of 500 years of accumulated wealth, but most likely doesn't have enough wealth for the next 50, and that's critical. But Julien, on to you, and just another remark on what was just said. It was perhaps very evilish of the EU to allow Monsanto to poison the world and then just release Ozempic out there to unfatten everyone else. But perhaps it was, again, one of those coincidences or accidents of history. Europe could have had this Machiavellic plan to conquer the world, but it just by happenstance took place, and we are not capitalizing on that because Ozempic is now, just through the drain. Sorry for the side note. Julien, back to you. You are also French, also no, but you're living now in Portugal. You have like great experience also around the world, and recently, at least, I've noted a shift in, at least on the internet, how vocal are you being in regard to the European Union and to Europe, and how strongly are you defending, especially around all the propaganda that has been taking place on Twitter, but not only. And so I was curious to see your take on that, having you expand a little bit on the examples that you have been criticizing recently, the X fine, and the way that was kind of spun around on Twitter, fights or the potential to use alternative systems by the EU, such as satellite networks, instead of having to go and use the American equivalent, and eventually any other interesting examples. And the question then is, what's the game that's being played here by the powers that be, and how can people not fall for that? Because like the meme is nice, Europe is dead, it's the plastic bottle caps and everything else, but then there's the reality, and we are living here, and it's great quality of life and great universities and still great talent. So where does this dissonance comes from, and what can we do about it?
Well, I believe we all agree that the European Commission is it's a very bad organization. It was built to bring more powerful or more structured Europe after the Second War, but there's been a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of politics inside. But at the same time, there's a misunderstanding between what's currently being played and what is the goal of each of those superpowers. For example, China, Russia, or US. If you look at the narrative online, whoever doesn't like Europe are actually people that want Europe to be divided. So US, Russia, China, they're really pushing for Europe to be divided because division unleashed the ability to conquer. This happened with the Brexit. UK was part of Europe, European Commission, the EU. And you add a lot of attacks, being able to make this vote possible from the Brexit, and look at UK today, is not necessarily doing very well. So the misunderstanding is what people see online and believe this is true. It's a game. Unless you realize that it's a game, then you're being played. Because US wants to have individual countries so they can leverage their power to enforce any type of policy, any type of economical situation. So if you're only by yourself, you cannot actually compete with the US or compete with China. It's barely impossible. You get all the bad products coming in your country, and you have to make all the different sacrifices because you cannot actually compete different in defense, economically speaking. So the point being, if you look at X is controlled by a private company, Elon Musk, and they're pushing any type of narrative that will make more money for them or more economical power. And in Europe, it's very strange that when we get a FUD, we auto-criticize ourselves. It's nice to have a self-retrospective way of understanding if we're good or bad. But in America, it's completely different. In America, they could sell a poop and tell you it's a gold bar, and you will buy it in Europe because they say it's true. In Europe, it's completely different. We let the FUD affect us and believe this is true. We shouldn't actually, it's a game, and the rule of the games is fighting. So you have two different types of people. You have the people that say, okay, we're bad in Europe, and they will use it as personal economical incentive because it provides them more financial value. For example, on X right now, if you kiss the ass of anyone pushing narrative from America, then you get more views. So you have people that will say, okay, my incentive is to say, yes, this is true, Europe is bad, and whatever, and I will not fight it because it brings me more economical value. And you have other people, they say, no, this is not true. There's bad things happening in Europe, but I will fight the system. So those two categories of people, then you either end up like during the Second War, it's over, Nazis are coming, it's over, Europe, there's no way we can fight it back, then we let it go, or we fight, and then we end up being kind of a free country. So my point being, I've been vocally more and more present online because I believe and I understand the rules of the game, and I'm trying to basically tell people, don't fall for the trap. Don't let yourself affected by what people are actually trying to sell you, because this is actually not the reality, and this is the power and the game of the super powerful countries that are trying to make you believe whatever happening in Europe, it's over.
Yeah, propaganda is a hell of a drug, and it's working quite well. And the crypto ethos was all about creating alternative networks that have dynamics that can resist this, and it's interesting to see how difficult it is to bootstrap alternative social networks, for example, with Farcaster example, just because then the market dynamics are not there, and that's where the incentive is.
And if I can come back to your point, I don't necessarily agree with the fact that we don't have massive companies. We have enormous amount of massive companies, but they are more like old school type of industrial company. If you look at market size, most of the biggest companies in Europe are actually not American or Chinese company. ASML, those type of companies that are driving silicon, microchips. You have massive, you have a CRM one, which is like 400 billion market cap. Most of them, you have in the top 20, they're all in the range of 400 billions, $500 billion US. Of course, it's not like $1 or $2 trillion, but I will believe it's actually more, the intrinsic value of this company are more real than actually the American one, because the American, they're printing money and they sell you the money. So they are really highly inflated companies. But in Europe, we're not printing money. I mean, we're actually printing, but not to the scale of the US. So we have a large amount of companies.
Yeah, on the other end of the top 50, only 5 of them were created in the last 50 years. And so
Yeah,
they're all
true,
old stodgy companies, and more than 80% in the United States, the top 50 companies were created in the past 20. And so that's what I'm saying. The rate of progress, the rate of direction, it's all one way.
Yeah. Yeah. And this brings us to an interesting point, Marina, which is like the fact that as one of the top crypto policy lobbyists in Europe, you have interfaced a lot with the policymakers on the one hand and the founders and the builders on the other end. And given that it's like ASML aside, like it's fairly clear that Europe has lost the digital train and is now catching up, and it's still possible to build a digital plane, but there's a lot to be done there. But then the question is, how do you see like the complaints of the founders being heard in Brussels? How are you seeing then the vision of the policymakers and even the design of the political system as suitable for what lies ahead?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I feel like the first part of the panel was really debating like what's positive, what's negative, a lot of things that are debated on the crypto Twitter, and what's happening in reality in Brussels, and how do we see things there. I would say that, as I said before in the talk, things are pretty predictable in Brussels. We can change some things, I would say, but like it takes a long time. And from, commenting on discussing or being in a debate within a crypto Twitter, discussion versus working on a topic for 6 years in order for this, for example, law on the 28th regime or something being finalized, like it's a huge difference. And I would say that, like, are we using social media to basically make people, feel FUD and just like say everything, we shouldn't do anything, everything is broken, just like leave, or make people being motivated to do stuff and to really maintain this like motivation for years, because it's really taking a long time. Before you ask if we're bullish or bearish, it's like if you do policy, you have to be bullish. Like you have to be optimistic in order to basically motivate yourself to do that day by day, no matter what happens. And over the years, you basically see changes. Like I was just telling, I think, Julien before, a year ago, in December, I was talking to someone from the Commission and the Parliament about the 28th regime, which was just the beginning of the discussions before the new Commission, before the new Parliament. And they were saying, Marina, forget about it. It's been discussed before. It will never happen. It's really something that is like on a wish list, but no one will go into that. And so later on this year, last year already, 2025, because of the changes in the global, basically, situation, there are few things that happen within the Commission that we were not expecting in the year 2024 to happen in the year 2025. And I think this is also a good opportunity for us to, do certain things to push for specific laws or initiatives. And one of those is definitely the 28th regime. There are a few others. For example, there's a big focus on the EU infrastructure, thinking about the EU cloud, EU AI, etc., focusing on sovereignty. This is a big topic at the moment, and also looking for opportunities for basically funding founders, making easier to support innovation, of course, going back to the Draghi report. So I would say that the situation right now is pretty good in terms of people are willing to do stuff and they are optimistic for the future. But at the same time, we have the legacy systems and governance, as you mentioned. The whole processes are very, very long. There's a lot of I would say things that make it pretty long and disputable as well. And there are certain things that, of course, I would say as an initiative, but also personally, we're not very excited about. For example, the CSAM, so the basically discussions on scanning personal messages and not using encryption, stuff like chat control, and similar topics that, in a way, we're fighting against. But there are also things that I would say that are pretty positive. And on a crypto topic specifically in finance, I would basically make this, I would say, comment that is pretty important for all of us to think about. What do we think about a unified financial market in the EU? Is this something that will help us in the future or not? There's so many interests right now discussing this, the interest of each member state, the interest of each ministry of different countries. But I think we are aware that we don't have a unified financial market. We do not have one European, I would say, exchange, or even a market where all the European Union citizens would use a specific application in a very easy way. So this is also something that the European Commission is working on. There's political, I would say, tendencies to support that, but I think to a certain level. So still being realistic, this is not going to happen over time. But at least from my personal perspective, that could be a positive aspect. We started with MiCA being a regulation, so it is possible for everyone to just register in one country and offer the services all over Europe. Could we do something similar for the financial market as well, and would that help Europe?
There's also something I want to say on the propaganda piece. Generally, I agree. However, propaganda is particularly effective when it's laced with a huge dose of truth. In just the reality is that it's so easy to do anti-European propaganda because the truth on the ground is so bad in so many ways. So if we put on one end of the propaganda extreme of break up the EU, clearly geopolitical positioning, there's no reason why we should do this is counter our interests, we should not allow them to divide and conquer, fully on 100% propaganda. But on the other side though, at least with GDPR, we're taking it on the chin that we've done something, largely stupid, but with a really good background of trying to protect privacy. And that's fantastic that Europe cares about privacy of their citizens. And implementation problems aside, that's logically consistent. We care about privacy. But then chat control comes around and is the exact opposite. So even the schizophrenia of Europe around what is actually trying to defend allows us to honestly be punched in the face on both sides, because we punch on the face on GDPR being horrible and atrocious, and we get punched on the face on no, actually you want to go scan people's devices. And so the reality here is there's lack of cohesion even within Europe that has to be recognized, even on the directionality, and a lot of this propaganda just hits home and hits true. And I think for me, whenever I criticize, it's really to create more things like Europe acceleration. That's what I want to cause to shake people in Europe to understand, is sort of for them to actually take up the mantle of the flag of the European Union and do something about it, versus this kind of just let it be. Which
I believe you can do the same type of propaganda against US.
100%. It's just not effective for Americans.
If you look at the debt in the US, it's a tick bomb. I mean, it's worse than the European economy. It's terrible. Like, the debt is something that will hit America very soon and could actually collapse the entire worldwide economy. The problem is like because the algorithm is not built in order to amplify, and you cannot be rewarded by that same type of propaganda, so then people don't do it. But you can actually build any type of propaganda across the globe to any type of country in the same way that people are doing against Europe. It's just us that we accept the fact that we're getting fed and we use it and we amplify it ourselves.
Yeah.
But who gets beaten in the butt and just asks for more? It's crazy. Of course, we need to have self-retrospective way of understanding if it's true or not. But I believe that Europeans have a tendency to always accept the fate and just amplify it rather than actually focus on things that are beautiful and nice. I'm not saying this is perfect. I'm thinking this is extremely bad. I'm thinking we should be able to go, if you're on the battlefield, you don't actually search for the bullet. You try to hide yourself from the bullet. And then you send the bullets to people, but we're not actually sending any bullets. That's my point. I think we have an enormous amount of the good things in Europe, but we're not actually amplifying those things. We just tend to always amplify the bad things. Privacy, GDPR, KYC, end-to-end encryptions, many different things are good, but we'll just, for some reason, focus on the only thing that is bad. And then we say, yes, Americans, you're right, this is extremely bad. Let me do the work for you, let me amplify your shit. This is exactly what we're doing. Instead of fighting and building things. We could acknowledge the things that are bad, but we could also focus on things that are good. And we're not doing this.
Yeah. But you can always mock the bully, but the bully has the upper hand for a reason. So then the question is how do you...
It's like saying, okay, I got punished. I deserve to be punished. And now I'm calling and claiming all over, I got punished because of that. Rather than saying, look, I'm going to do better. Now it's me going out there, building good stuff. I mean, whatever is happening in the world, I believe it's good for Europe right now. Because Europe was dying, was terrible, malfunctioning, wrongly structured. But everything that is happening, the reason why now we are starting to understand who are our allies, who are our economical enemies, defense, global markets, capital markets for Europe, the 28 regime, the Europe Inc. for startups, common defense, whatever is happening to Greenland, whatever happened to Venezuela. It's a wake-up call. And we have to realize it's a wake-up call because we were dying. And now we have to use and leverage that wake-up call in order to make something beautiful and not to beat them ourselves. We've been beaten enough by other people. We're living here. I think we can make a good things out of it.
Wait, but your starting point is that Europe was dying, and so...
Yeah, Europe was dying, yeah.
Okay, so but that was the propaganda to a certain extent. That is the most extreme.
Yeah, but my point is like, I know it was dying, and I could...
So the propaganda
7 days
correct.
a week and 24 hours a day. I could amplify the fact that it was dying. Okay, cool. Do we get anything out of it? I don't think so. Or I could start having a different model, which is basically playing the same rules of the game, of the risk game. I know people are attacking us. If, like Elon Musk said, if we are doing something and our enemies are criticizing us, it means it's a good thing. Well, guess what? Who's criticizing Europe? Our enemies. So it's a good thing. Because Europe, if you look at the model and business-wise, it's actually one of the biggest, most powerful economy in the world. It's just like we're listening to the FUD too much.
The only thing that I cared about is for us to recognize what you said. And your quote was, Europe was dying. As long as we're from this baseline recognizing the problem, I think everything else is fine. And yes, we should do stuff and we should change it.
Yeah, it's true. Like
if
you get a cancer, you're diagnosed by a cancer, you're not going to call it, I have a cancer every single day. You'll try to find a solution for it. Right. What's the point of just calling yourself, I have a cancer, I have a cancer, I have a cancer?
I would just add to, if we agree on a problem right now, from now on we have to build something better. So that is what requires also, I would say, within the community, thinking about, can we even have our representatives elected in the EU Parliament? What and how would the crypto Twitter, motivate people, young people, to be more involved or less involved in the processes? Are we involved in the processes when it comes to, I don't know, lobbying, policy, etc.? And those are the hard things, and those are the things that require time, strategy, etc. But I think that this is what we need to do right now, and it's an amazing opportunity to discuss at this conference.
Yeah. And this is exactly where I want to shift the conversation, which is the problem is clear. Then the question is the realm of opportunities to work at, and what are the alternatives here? And this is where I think there's also a lot to digress on and a lot of potential divergences, because on the one hand, like the current system works very much on a continuum and you do incremental change. On the other hand, we are tired of how slow that is, and we need speed to take advantage of the current opportunity that you were just portraying. The world is fucked up right now, and the opportunity is there to be grabbed. And if we're not fast, we are going to die again. And so typically, I'm more of a revolutionary person. I was also a full-time crypto lobbyist for 3 years here in Portugal. Ended up like writing the Portuguese crypto tax law with a bunch of other people here in the room. But then you can only do like those kind of historical wins when the winds are in your favor. If you are trying to fight against the system, even if only tangentially, and for example, the issues that we're just discussing are mostly related to the fact that some people in the EU have a good vision, some policymakers want to enact change, but at the same time, we have 500 million people with so many entrenched interests from the old money and from folks that are just old and have no interest in the future, that it's very difficult to do that change in the current system. And so I don't have a specific plan for the revolution yet, perhaps next year, but I want to think, or I want to hear from you, what are your thoughts on the paths ahead? Like, should we be more moderate or not? What are the paths for revolution? Is this kind of creating a European federation? Is this hybrid model where we create a new EU and we kill this EU, because that's also possible? What's at stake for you, and what are you thinking as potentially interesting ideas to advance? Because this is where we shift the Overton window. So,
I would like for some vibe governance versus 6-year time horizons to change anything.
I think the first time I've heard that's a good one.
I just made it up.
Yeah. And we have some more time, so no worry about the clock.
Okay.
Well, I think every one of us, at an individual level and business-wise, we can start adopting tools and technology that are, if possible, European-made, and start talking about it. So the game right now, it's whatever you do, you post it on social network, because it gets amplified by the algorithm. So you need to use the same. For example, I was using for 2 years the SpaceX, it's called the Starlink device. I used it because it was kind of like friendly and very smooth. But now I'm using another device. It's probably not the same UI interface, and I don't get payment on time or whatever. It's not like really user-friendly. But actually, it works better. I mean, in terms of speed and efficiency and cost, it's much better. I think we got used of simplicity. Whatever is simple, I have to pay for it, high cost, and it will save me a lot of time. It's not necessarily always true. For example, a good example is AWS. I got myself in AWS when I started actually in this industry. Back in Cosmos and Solana, I was using bare metal solutions, and then I switched to AWS. And I got my mind in the AWS, and it got extremely difficult. It took me 3 years, and we're still with the group. I have a little pieces in AWS because the mindset was Amazon AWS mindset. But now we switched to bare metal solution. We are saving 20 times more money, and the time that we're spending is actually even less, because instead of having like Terraform, like all this really complicated orchestration or whatever, we're just using a system that works very well. Okay, the UI and the interface is not super solid, but it still works well, and you have privacy, you have security, and all different things. My point is, like, I think at individual level in business-wise, we can start using some tools that, for example, sovereignty tool, like make Europe better. Of course, they will probably not be as good or as simple as the one that you use from other countries, but it's a good start.
So my job is basically to create plans for what you asked before. If you tell me I want to change that, I will tell you how much effort you need to, put into this, money and time, and if it's realistic or not. But at the same time, we do also need a little bit of luck, and seeing things that you cannot be predicted. So what happened in the war this year was very unpredictable to a certain point. So there's also things that can basically add into your plan that in a positive way. On the other side, I know that in the last few years we're talking a lot about financial nihilism, and I think right now maybe we go into this European nihilism. All of us here in the room, all the founders, everyone that is building in a space, everyone that is basically, being kind of a vocal on social media, I guess we would need to fight this like European nihilism or like nihilism in general, and seeing that there are ways of like, by using different tech, by educating ourselves on different options, and also going and being politically active, basically changing things. We cannot change things by just tweeting on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing, I think it's like right now it's quite comfortable to live in Europe due to all the things that we talked about here, like family, quality of life, and then just be incorporated elsewhere and just live that dual life. But perhaps with the world changing right now, that's going to be increasingly difficult, and that can be a wake-up call for us to change our systems for the better. Very well.
If I can add something, the reason why I'm bullish as well is because this new technology, AI, is going to shape the world and society in a completely different ways. So of course we'll miss the digital transformation and internet revolution, but this technology, we don't even know what this technology will have as an impact to society. We're seeing the tsunami coming, but we don't even know how big is this tsunami. And we don't know how this tsunami is going to completely revolutionize how we function as a society. So if we start adopting this tool, we might be able to flip whatever path we were into something that is a good outcome for us. Because we don't know what's coming. So that's why I spend money in AI, compute, data center, like all the infrastructure that can drive and adopt and help you flourish that type of revolution. We need to own those tools.
Yeah. Just to fill the panelists here as well, like what do you think of how interesting will be the idea of, for example, some member states in Europe, like the UK has already left, some other countries in Europe that never joined, such as Switzerland, eventually some other countries at the periphery of Europe that may not be satisfied with the current standing of the EU, leaving, say Portugal, and trying to create an alternative union. Like imagine if Portugal and Switzerland and the UK united, and eventually they will get France on board or not, in case you got angry with the Germans. Like, how far-fetched do you think such a possibility is within our lifetimes? And even more far-fetched will be then to unite with other countries around the world, say, then these small trio of countries will unite with Singapore and the Emirates and whatnot, some country in Latin America, Venezuela perhaps. Like, how crazy will this be? How stupid will this be? How enticing will this be versus the status quo of slow change? Feel free to call it stupid.
I think it's more positive outcome. I mean, part of why we're suffering is because we have too many cooks in the kitchen. We know this from consensus, from human consensus. If you want to derail a meeting, add more people. That's it. That's how you derail a meeting. It's literally on the CIA manual of how to sabotage a meeting. So now imagine that you're trying to make decisions and you add more countries. Obviously, if you reduce the number of countries, you have better decisions. It does have downsides in terms of capabilities. So maybe one potential solution is like bring a lot more power to each individual country. I think we need it right now. The way that this is constructed, like each individual country delegates a lot of responsibility and still maintain the military cohesion of the bloc itself and potentially on the economic exclusive zone, because those are two of the most powerful forces, but allow for like as much self-governance as you can, with those two being protected at the bloc level. However, reducing the number of countries means just faster moving, better decisions, and overall just more progress. It makes no sense that we're taking 6 years to do stuff, and especially in an age of AI where everything is changing every 3 months. And I generally like the sentiment of like, part of the solution is for somehow us and the founders and the citizens to do something different. Why would I use a shittier system? Why would I have to sacrifice myself to use a shittier system? That does not resonate with me at all, at all. The problem is the problem of governance. The governance has to change. Someone needs to make it easier for me to elect something that is better. Somebody needs to make something in Europe that is better so that I happily select it. And by all means, if I'm about to choose between two different things, and they're mostly equivalent in my own understanding between an American technology or European technology, by all means, I'll use the European technology maybe just because, or the Portuguese fruit. I'll buy the Portuguese fruit just because. But if you're giving me like two different things and you're giving me a slightly shittier one, and you're fucking up my governance, and you take 6 years to do anything, and there's tons of corruption and like inability of like getting anything done in this fucking like union, why would I select something that makes my life harder? Fuck that.
Yeah. Patriotism versus pragmatism. I like that.
Well, you have also the other side of the story where people are pushing for a federated Europe. If you look at America, each of the states could be considered as a country, and they all function very well. So it's just a matter of governance. And I agree with you, if you're in a system where you have corruptions, whether you want to choose a tool that brings you more pain. But I'm talking about a system where you trust the system and the system is changed, because we said the system was dying. I'm talking about a system that is well functioning, then you better choose the tool that brings you value. It's the same as, why do you go to the butcher if you want to buy the meat that is more expensive, or you could go to a big shopping center. But the big shopping center, the money never gets back to you, while the butcher can actually bring back a local economy. It's just a matter of where do you look at the picture. I think in federated Europe, with a common political path, a common defense is really good, because then you can enforce global policy and governance across other countries that are trying to attack you. I don't believe in a world where we're playing at scale, human scale, 400 billion, a billion, 1.2 billion, India, almost 2 billion. Maybe those numbers are completely incorrect, but that then you just go back to a country with 20 million, 25 million, you can actually compete on an economically speaking matter. It's impossible. You really need to have a strong envelope, 400, half a billion people, focus on AI, because the more AI you have, the less people you need. But you need AI first, if you need less people. Now we have the people, so we need to keep the people. If you look at US, it's functioning very well. Federated Europe, federated the US, so United States of America, United States of Europe, but we'll keep the culture. And if you look in the US, they keep the culture in each state. Different driving speed, different way of looking at things, guns, law, whatever. Maybe that's the future, if you want to survive.
Yeah, if well implemented, for sure.
Yeah.
Marina, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that, I hope we do agree in this room that what happened in the last few years, even in the last year, was something that was unprecedented, at least for our generation. We've also seen, because of unprecedented things happening, also unprecedented reactions to what happened. For example, have you heard about the basically revolution in Bulgaria, where they were protesting in their streets and they overthrown their own government? There were protests in Serbia for, I think, around 2 years or even more. Unfortunately, they didn't manage to overthrow their government. But what is happening right now? We're talking about DAOs, governance, country. What is basically a government? We agreed that the government is going to work in our favor, and that we have given the sovereignty to the government in order for it to work on us. Whenever we feel that this is not the case, we have a proof. In Bulgaria, they have overthrown the government because they thought that they were not working in their interests. And I would think that, looking forward, we will probably have a very, very challenging times ahead of us, thinking about how much knowledge we have, being the tech elite of Europe, having all these tools in our hands, understanding how to use them, which ones are the ones that we would want to promote. I think there's a lot of responsibility on us thinking about all these things, and just in a way being ready for when these things are needed, and also sharing topics and education, etc., and empowerment with everyone else in the community.
Yeah.
I think my advice to people, by the way, is work extremely hard, build extremely large companies, become a centi-billionaire, and then with that power that you've built and that wealth that you build, then you can actually affect change. Because right now, if you're sitting in the audience and you've never built anything of relevance, and your purchasing power is nil, and you've hired 5 people, then you don't have that much power. And so I would urge for the people that care about Europe, become big, become a person of influence, become an extremely wealthy person, and then you can use that to affect the things that you care about. I think that may be actually the only possible path. There is already privatized politics in the United States in the form of Elon Musk and everybody else, We need privatized form of governance in Europe too. So we need billionaires with opinions here too.
Definitely. We need
Become a
scale.
billionaire is my advice.
To wrap this up, just before lunch, repetition is key for learning, and we definitely need to reinforce what we have heard here today. So from each of you, like I've heard a bunch of call to actions here. What's like the most important call to action from each of you that you want to reinforce with this audience today?
Become a billionaire, exert influence.
Be aware of the game.